So, questions today, and Bob has gone through these.
So the biggest one is always the why suffering one.
Why is there suffering? Bad things happen to good people. It looks like the end of the world is upon us. Why do we always think it happens only to us? It's a very interesting question, this, why do people suffer? Before, theologically, there used to be this idea that people suffer because of free will, right? That God created the world perfect and we sinned. That's the Adam and Eve story. We sinned. Sin came upon the world. In that time, sin was not something you did. It was this entity, right? Sin was like an entity that entered the world and sits upon us. And so we have the choice, we have the ability to choose what is right, but we choose what is wrong. And so we suffer as a result when we choose the things that are wrong. And I think there's some truth to that in our world. We make bad choices lots of times, right? I mean, haven't we all made bad choices that leads to suffering in our lives or someone else's? I mean, if you haven't, I'd like to meet you because you should be next to Mother Teresa, right?
Yeah, but just remember the struggles she went through.
I know, she had lots of struggles too, but... There's some theological thinking now, and I'm just putting it out there, that God is not omnipotent, as they say. You know, God can do anything. That God is learning as we learn, that God is in relationship with us, that God actually could not stop all the suffering. That's one idea that's out there. Another one is that God, and this is a very strong theological idea in the Christian church right now, is that God is the first one to cry, that God suffers with us as well, that God cries at the world and the brokenness in the world. We can never understand, I don't think, why there is so much suffering in the world. What we can do is know that as the world unfolds, I always say the universe unfolds as it should, and that as it unfolds in this sort of textured way, that our suffering and the suffering of the world, that we are called to redeem the world, and we are called to be the hands and feet of Christ in the world. And our job is not so much to question why is there suffering, but to give everything we have to relieving it in God's name. That's a quick answer to that, Bob.
And I would always draw us to the cross, that at the heart of the Christian message is the one who hangs powerless on the cross. So it's at the heart of who we are.
There's an interesting question here. I see it says, why do people who are or say they are Christians still have prejudices against other ethnic persons? Do they not know any better? And that is an interesting question, you know, because especially in the election in the United States right now, evangelical leaders are really supporting Donald Trump and all that he said. And I think we can all agree he said some things that are pretty inflammatory against certainly Latino people and others. And yet these Christian leaders are supporting him. And I find that very disturbing myself, because even though it's important to remember that the Christian movement was a Jewish movement, and in some senses it was nationalistic. You know, there are times in the scriptures, you know, where a Gentile will come to Jesus and he says, why should I go to you, right? You know, and then there's other times when the Gentile people say, you know, even the dogs get the scraps from the table, and admonish Jesus for not paying attention to those who are not within the Jewish faith. But Paul is very clear that the Christian faith is grounded in this idea that we are all one. There is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. This is an important, central to the Christian message, is that God is for everyone, right? So I do find it disturbing.
I would just add, not all evangelical leaders. A lot
No,
are
no.
speaking out.
Yes, there are those who
And
are
maybe
speaking
just
up.
one quick word on that. We were just in Saskatchewan. You may have heard the news about some from near a reservation came on a farm, probably were trying to steal some gas. The farmer goes in and gets his gun, shoots the young guy, and it escalates. So the whole racism question is back on the plate. Growing up in Saskatchewan, racism is in our bones.
Well, and it's this idea that there is an other that's not like us. I mean, it is a natural and normal thing for people to try and be together with people who are like them, right? Because in a world where you don't understand or you're afraid, if anyone read Thomas Hobbes before, law, the law came into being, we were kind of in a constant state of war. You didn't know when the next neighborhood was going to come in and steal all your crops and leave you there. So there is built in us this sense of we want to protect ourselves. And that's the whole thing about being Christian or having God in our lives, is to overcome those tendencies that we have. That is the toughest thing, to overcome what is our instinct. And that's why, as a Christian community, we stand in solidarity with those who are on the margins, because it's central to our faith that all are included. But here's the thing, there's grace too. When we have these feelings like, these feelings like I'm not comfortable, or I didn't know the struggles of other ethnic communities, there is grace. And that's our journey, is towards being in a place where everyone is accepted, loved, and has the ability to participate fully in the community.
And since we've got a lot of questions, do you want to stay on the faith topic or go into the affirming questions? You
Sure,
want to go
affirming.
practical?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
we'll go practical for a moment.
Practical, affirming. We are an all-welcoming church. Why do we need a flag or banner in our churchyard after affirming? There's a big difference between welcoming and inclusive, right? So, and the best explanation I could give for you about this is a friend of mine who is a lesbian, and she and her partner have been together for 30 years. And she found this nice little United Church in PEI, and they loved her. They had tea with her. They welcomed her every day. Everything was fine. She did not feel like she could share her life with them. If she brought up her partner, people would get maybe a little uncomfortable. Or if their son that they were raising together, she didn't feel like she could tell them about the struggles that they were having with him. So she felt very welcomed in that place and loved the people. She did not feel included because her life, she was not able to bring her life to the place. So many people in the LGBT community, that stands for lesbian, gay, transgendered, and bisexual, and there's other acronyms that are in there too, other initials. They have seen the television. They saw, they see the signs at funerals that hate groups like Westboro Baptist that basically say God doesn't love you. They have heard the rhetoric from churches and religious leaders about how your choice, again, they think, say it's a choice, is not valid. And they've heard this thing, love the sinner, hate the sin, which says, you're sinning. So understandably, people in the LGBTQ community feel unsafe in churches. They don't feel like it's going to be a place that's going to include them or even welcome them. And so when we make this statement that we are an affirming ministry, it is not for us. Well, it reminds us, hey, we promised we were going to allow everyone to be a part of our community, not just come in and say hi and have tea with them, but to hear their struggles, to hear about their family lives, to let them be part as their whole selves in our community, even though it makes us uncomfortable sometimes. My friend Pam would say, Pam Rocker, who's going to be with us, if some people are comfortable all the time, then some people are uncomfortable all the time. And so it's a statement for us, but also a statement to the world, and particularly to the LGBTQ community, that this is a safe place. We've done our work. We have talked about what it means to be inclusive versus welcoming, and you can come here and know you can be here with your whole self. That's why that's important.
You've covered that.
That's, yeah.
Maybe that question.
Is this,
The question came up there too. Why do we not have proxy votes in the United Church? Doesn't happen in the United Church, just know that. Every court of the church, at the local church board level, presbytery conference, general council, votes on its own. And no one knows what the motion will be here on that meeting day. Because some of you may want to refer it, or amend it, or postpone it. But the Spirit works in the group. But you can get your letters in, and your voice will be heard.
right.
So maybe we better move on
Just
into
this
some...
one other thing is important. What happens after we become an affirming congregation?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Well, nothing, except that we've said we're an affirming congregation. And before us will be people who are on the affirming committee who are going to remind us from time to time that we have said we're an affirming community, which also means that we'll talk about marginalized people who are poor, or marginalized people on race issues, marginalized people who are disabled. All kinds of different people feel like the church is not a place for them. So when we make the statement that we're affirming, we're not saying we are right now, like, come on in, everything's perfect here, because we know that's not true, and it won't be. What we say when we vote to be affirming is that we promise to live into that. We promise we're going to make our best attempts to become an inclusive community.
And since we've got lots of questions
Yep.
yet, and you'll read them all, of course.
No.
These are some practical worship questions that you put out here about, and then we've got a series on McDougall questions.
Okay, all right. But we have to be done soon, too.
Yes.
So we can bring this up next week or another time.
And you'll read them all.
Can we have another service with just the old hymns like we did one other Sunday? Yes, of course. We will do that once or twice a year. Not to worry about that. There was this thing on Facebook, which was a fundraiser that was strike a hymn. You know, when people are really sick of hymns, you voted, you auctioned, bid on which hymn you'd like to get rid of forever. And the person who won, that was not sung for a year, so we could try that too. Why not continue with either having Bible readings in the bulletin or on the projectors? Okay, this is something Bob and I disagree with.
Don't get us going on that one.
We've talked about that. The Bible is meant to be heard, right? So when we read the Bible, you're meant to hear it. That's how it was in an oral tradition. When the readings are in the bulletin or on the projector, it becomes a more personal experience because you're reading it, right? And then the other thing is if it's on the projector in the bulletin and there's a mistake, everyone goes, oh, she read that wrong. Oh,
That's
she
all
missed
right.
that.
I go with the mistakes. I always believe in seeing and hearing. So we're very different on this one,
Yeah.
but it's okay.
Yep, that's okay.
Whoever said we all had agreed?
So when Bob leads the service, the scriptures
You'll
on-
get the scriptures.
Yeah. Is it necessary to have the peace every Sunday because it's very disruptive? And this one comes up again and again. I'll tell you, my feeling is, remember when we said the essential thing of the Christian community is that everybody is welcome and that we're all the same. In a world where there was great animosity between groups, to be able to pass the peace to each other and say, you know what, I got nothing against you, you're part of my community, was a central part of the Christian tradition. And that passing of the peace has been an important part of Christian services since the very, very beginning.
And I would add to that, every church nowadays generally has some way to warm and welcome people. When we pass the peace, we create life in the community. And this place goes crazy. You don't need to go quite as crazy. They're all going all over the room shaking hands. But it warms the place up. And you need to do it every week, or how do you build community?
We didn't do it this week, Bob.
You slipped up.
I did. I missed it.
Do it at the end of the service.
So I would like to say we don't do it every week.
We'll do it at the end of the service.
Please explain the colors and seasons of the church year.
We'll do that another day.
We'll do that another day. We'll go through that. Can we sing more of the older hymns?
No, can you imagine that question coming up?
Today.
Yeah.
Today of all days.
We haven't had too many older hymns today.
Not today. That's my fault, because I was just in a mood when I put the service together.
She'll work on that one.
I would just like to say about why we don't have more older hymns. First of all, there is one older hymn in every service. I make sure that we have an older hymn today. We're going to sing it to the tune of Joyful, Joyful, We Adore Thee at the end. So there is always an old hymn. This church is in transition, I believe that I've been called to transition this church. I love old hymns too. We're trying to create an environment that is more, not more, songs music that is more like people will normally hear. Like people who've never been to church, and they come in and they have a hymn. They're actually quite difficult to sing. And I know some of you say, oh, those contemporary hymns are difficult to sing. But to have, most contemporary music is more of a connection between God and with the earth and with each other. And a lot of those old hymns are very much, God is up here. And so it's a balance of these ideas and issues. And I promise I will always have an old hymn, maybe two, in every service.
And there's another question here about a brief history of the United Church. Love to do that at some point. Obviously, we won't do that today.
No. Old days, we had communion 4 times a year. That would be enough. And why do we have communion all the time? The idea of the service, and again, Bob and I disagree on this, is that it's always the service of the table,
yes,
even when we
I
don't
agree
take communion. Yes, that's right. So most times at the end is when you do the prayers and the table stuff. So we have in the United Church come back to this idea that as an ecumenical community, the Eucharist or the communion is the most important part of a service and the reminder of it. So it's once a month now.
Yeah.
I'm not particularly myself, it's not, but others.
Well, I just think, how do you grow? You know, and if you 4 times a year and you miss those Sundays, let's get it real here, but also for children. And remember in the 1970s, we began involving children in communion, and it became part of who they are. And we began with inclusive language. And wasn't that a fight? There's the United Church history. And, you know, when they would say inclusive language, not an issue, you know. But we've moved a long ways around communion and children involved in worship and people taking part and the passing of the peace. And so Joanne is doing great work, even if I don't always agree with everything she's doing. It's good stuff. So maybe this is a good place to wrap it up. And we've got the questions. She'll look at those. And we didn't really address the faith questions because there were a lot of important ones there you can pick up with on another day.
Yeah, for sure, we will. There was way more questions than I thought there would be. I thought you all had all the answers already. So good to know. Yes? Next week, we will have communion and the welcome back. Yes, I know Bob came. Are we having communion on Sunday? And I said, it's still the summer.
I said, get a grip. We should do it in the summer as well. I would have done it in August, but
see the difference?
We have no feelings around
we
this
have
stuff.
we have these discussions all the time, Bob and I, about these important theological issues, like how often to have communion. Please stand with me as we finish our closing hymn.